I'm Stephanie Mitchell, 28 years old, and I've spent my entire life standing in my sister's shadow. When Nathan proposed last year, I finally felt like the spotlight was rightfully on me for once. I had no idea that my own mother would demand I cancel my wedding because my golden child sister Amber couldn't handle seeing me happy. What happened next changed my family forever. I never expected to uninvite my own parents from my wedding, but sometimes standing up for yourself means making impossible choices. Drop a comment where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to my channel if you want to hear how I turned the tables on my toxic family in a way that left everyone speechless. Growing up, it was always crystal clear who the favorite child was in our household. From the moment my sister Amber was born when I was 3, my parents, especially my mother Margaret, treated her like she hung the moon and stars. Our family photo albums tell the story better than I ever could. Amber's birthdays featured elaborate parties with ponies and bounce houses, while mine were afterthoughts with grocery store cakes. When I brought home straight A's, my achievements barely warranted a good job, but when Amber got a B+ on a test, my parents took her out for a celebration dinner. My father Richard wasn't as obvious about the favoritism, but he never stepped in to correct the imbalance either. I remember one Christmas when I was 12 and Amber was 9. I had been begging for a new bike for months, saving my allowance to contribute, making hints. Christmas morning came, and there was no bike for me, but Amber received one without ever asking. When I couldn't hide my disappointment, my mother pulled me aside and scolded me for being selfish and trying to ruin Amber's special moment. These patterns continued throughout our adolescence. When I needed money for a school trip, I had to babysit for months to earn it. When Amber wanted to attend a cheerleading camp that cost twice as much, my parents wrote the check without hesitation. College was no different. Amber got a car to take to university, while I took the bus to my campus across town. My parents paid her full tuition while I worked 2 jobs to cover what my scholarships didn't. I'm not sharing these memories to sound bitter. Over time, I developed coping mechanisms. I became fiercely independent. I learned to celebrate my own victories, no matter how small. I built friendships with people who valued me for who I was. I pursued my career as an event planner with determination, proving to myself that I could succeed without family support. And then 3 years ago, I met Nathan. Nathan saw me. I saw me in a way no one in my family ever had. He listened when I talked about my day. He remembered details about stories I told him. He celebrated my promotions and comforted me during setbacks. For the first time, I felt truly valued, not for what I could do for someone else, but simply for being who I was. Our relationship bloomed steadily. We moved in together after a year, combining our book collections and adopting a rescue dog named Cooper. Nathan's family embraced me immediately. His mother, Emily, called me the daughter she never had, and his father, James, taught me how to make his famous chili recipe, an honor he didn't bestow on just anyone. The proposal came during our favorite weekend tradition, hiking to the summit of Maple Ridge. We'd been doing this hike every month for almost 2 years. This particular day, Nathan seemed unusually quiet, but I assumed he was tired from his long work week as a software engineer. When we reached the top, overlooking the valley where we'd first gone camping together, he pulled out a small wooden box he'd carved himself. "Stephanie," he said, his voice catching slightly, "you've shown me what it means to be brave, to be resilient, to love without conditions. Will you continue this journey with me as my wife?" Inside the box was his grandmother's sapphire ring, reset with small diamonds on either side. I said yes through tears, and as we embraced, a family who had been taking photos nearby offered to capture the moment for us. That picture with windblown hair, Nathan kneeling, both of us grinning like fools with the valley stretched out behind us, still sits on our mantle. When we called our families that evening to share the news, the contrasts couldn't have been starker. Nathan's parents screamed with joy, immediately offering to help with whatever we needed. My mother's first response was, "Oh, well, that's nice. Did you hear Amber got promoted at work?" Despite the underwhelming reaction, I was determined to enjoy this season of my life. I had found someone who chose me first, who made me feel worthy of love. Nothing, not even my family's apathy, could diminish that joy. Nathan and I spent the first few weeks after our engagement just enjoying the moment before diving into wedding planning. We'd sit on our balcony in the evenings, sipping wine and imagining our future together. We agreed on most of the big things. We wanted an intimate ceremony with close friends and family, nothing ostentatious, but beautiful and meaningful. After researching several venues, we fell in love with Pinecrest Lake Lodge, a rustic, elegant venue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. We set our date for June 15th, giving us almost a year to plan. The venue came with a coordinator named Diane who helped us navigate the overwhelming world of vendors and timelines. I'd planned corporate events for years, but planning my own wedding felt entirely different. Each decision felt weighted with significance. Nathan was wonderfully involved, offering opinions without trying to control the process. We chose a color scheme of dusty blue and silver, found a fantastic photographer whose style captured the candid moments we valued, and selected a caterer who could accommodate Nathan's mother's celiac disease without making it a big deal. The first signs of trouble came when I emerged from the dressing room in the third gown in A-line with delicate lace-cap sleeves that made me feel like a princess. I was met with a lukewarm response. "It's nice," my mother said, scrolling through her phone. "But don't you think it's a bit plain? Amber would look stunning in something with more beading." "Mom, Amber isn't the one getting married," I reminded her gently. She sighed dramatically. "I know that, Stephanie. I'm just saying that you might want something more flattering for your figure." The bridal consultant, sensing tension, quickly brought over a veil that transformed the look. When I started tearing up seeing my reflection, my mother finally put her phone down and acknowledged that I cleaned up nicely. I bought the dress despite her lackluster approval because when I wore it, I felt like the bride I wanted to be. My sister Amber initially seemed supportive, volunteering to be my maid of honor and suggesting we go for lunch to discuss wedding plans. During our meal, however, her questions took an unsettling turn. "So, are you inviting Ryan?" she asked, referring to her boyfriend of 2 years. "Of course," I replied. "He's your plus one." "Good, because I'm thinking of proposing to him soon," she announced. "Wouldn't it be amazing if we had a double wedding?" I nearly choked on my salad. "Amber, you're not even engaged yet." She waved her hand dismissively. "Details. Ryan and I have talked about it. Don't you think a double wedding would be more economical for Mom and Dad?" I carefully explained that Nathan and I had already put deposits down on a venue sized for our guest list, and that we had a specific vision for our day. Amber pouted through the rest of lunch, and later that evening, I received a series of passive-aggressive texts from my mother asking why I was being difficult about including my sister in my special day. The contrasting experiences with Nathan's family only highlighted the dysfunction in my own. When we visited his parents for dinner, Emily had created a scrapbook with wedding planning sections, complete with magazine clippings and notes about things she thought we might like, all presented with the caveat that these are just ideas. You two make whatever choices feel right to you. James had researched photographers in our area and offered to contribute to that portion of our budget as an engagement gift. Neither of them tried to take over or make the wedding about their preferences. As venue visits and vendor meetings progressed, my mother's attempts to control decisions intensified. She insisted on attending a meeting with our caterer, where she questioned every menu choice and suggested alternatives that aligned with Amber's preferences, not ours. When I selected bridesmaid dresses in our dusty blue color, my mother called to inform me that Amber looks washed out in blue, and I should consider purple instead. Nathan noticed my growing stress after these interactions and suggested we limit my family's involvement in the planning process. "It's our wedding," he reminded me. "We're the ones who have to look back on these memories for the rest of our lives." I knew he was right, but years of conditioning made it difficult to establish boundaries. I compromised by keeping my parents informed of major decisions after they were made, rather than consulting them during the decision-making process. This strategy worked reasonably well for a few months, and wedding planning returned to being a joyful experience rather than a battlefield. But looking back, I should have recognized these moments as red flags, warning signs of the storm that was about to engulf what should have been the happiest time of my life. 2 months before our wedding, with most of the major details finalized, Nathan and I agreed to attend a family dinner at my parents' house. My mother had been unusually insistent about this particular Sunday dinner, saying she had something important to discuss. I assumed it might be related to the rehearsal dinner, which my parents had reluctantly agreed to host. When we arrived, the atmosphere felt strangely tense. My father answered the door with a tight smile, and my mother was hovering in the kitchen, checking her watch repeatedly. Amber arrived 20 minutes late, her eyes puffy and red. She made a dramatic entrance, accepting extended hugs from both my parents before acknowledging Nathan and me with a curt nod. During the awkward appetizer course, my mother kept shooting meaningful glances at Amber, who was pushing food around her plate without eating. Finally, as my father served the main course, my mother cleared her throat. "Stephanie, Nathan," she began with a gravity normally reserved for announcing terminal illnesses, "Amber has something she needs to share." My sister dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, took a deep breath, and announced, "Ryan and I broke up last night." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "While Amber and I had our issues, I didn't wish heartbreak on her." "What happened?" "He said he wasn't ready for commitment," Amber sobbed. After I mentioned looking at engagement rings, my mother reached over to squeeze her hand. "She's absolutely devastated. They've been together for over 2 years." "That's tough," Nathan offered sympathetically. "Breakups are never easy." I nodded in agreement, but something about the intensity of my parents' reactions seemed disproportionate. Amber and Ryan had a volatile relationship at best, with frequent breaks and reconciliations. This didn't seem fundamentally different from their usual pattern. "The timing couldn't be worse," my mother continued, giving me a pointed look. With all this wedding talk and celebrations coming up. And there it was, the real reason for the family dinner. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "It's just so hard," Amber wailed. "Watching Stephanie plan her perfect wedding while my relationship falls apart. Every time someone mentions June 15th, I think about how Ryan and I won't be together, and it feels like being stabbed in the heart." My father, who had been silently serving potatoes, finally spoke. "We're concerned about Amber's emotional well-being. This wedding is becoming a trigger for her." I exchanged glances with Nathan, whose expression had shifted from sympathy to wariness. "I understand it's difficult," I said carefully, "but our wedding is in 8 weeks. Most of the arrangements are finalized." "That's exactly what we need to discuss," my mother interjected. "We think you need to make some changes to accommodate Amber's situation." What followed was a surreal conversation where my mother outlined increasingly unreasonable accommodations. First, Ryan should be removed from the guest list, reasonable enough. Then, Amber should be excused from her maid of honor duties, but still be given special recognition. Okay, understandable. Next, we should consider changing our first dance song because it was one of Amber and Ryan's songs too, it wasn't. Perhaps we could tone down the romance aspect of the ceremony to be sensitive to Amber's broken heart? With each suggestion, Nathan's posture grew more rigid beside me, though he remained respectfully silent, allowing me to handle my family. I tried to be diplomatic, agreeing to reasonable requests while gently pushing back on the more outlandish ones. Then came the bombshell. "Honestly, Stephanie," my mother said, setting down her fork with an air of finality, "the most considerate thing would be to postpone the wedding until Amber has had time to heal." The table fell silent. Even Amber looked somewhat taken aback. "Postpone our wedding?" I repeated, certain I had misheard. "You can't be serious." "Of course I'm serious," my mother replied. "Just push it back 6 months or so. Your deposits can't be more important than your sister's mental health." Nathan finally spoke, his voice level but firm. "With all due respect, Margaret, that's not a reasonable request. We've been planning this day for almost a year. Guests have booked flights and accommodations." My mother's expression hardened. "I didn't realize Stephanie needed your permission to support her sister." "That's not what Nathan began, but my mother cut him off. "You need to cancel your wedding," she stated flatly. "Amber can't handle seeing you happy right now. If you really loved your sister, you'd understand that." I felt like I'd been doused with ice water. "Mom, that's completely unfair." "What's unfair is you being selfish," she snapped. "After everything we've done for you, you can't make this one sacrifice for your sister." I looked to my father, hoping for some support or at least a voice of reason, but he stared down at his plate. "Your mother has a point, Steph," he muttered. "Family comes first." The rest of the dinner devolved into a heated argument. My mother brought up every perceived debt I owed my family, every instance where Amber had sacrificed for me, examples I couldn't recall, while my sister nodded tearfully beside her. Nathan attempted to suggest compromises, all of which were rejected as insufficient. "If you go through with this wedding," and there it was, the ultimatum, wrapped in the familiar package of emotional manipulation that had defined my childhood. "Cancel my wedding or lose my family's support entirely." We left shortly afterward, the dessert my mother had prepared sitting untouched on the counter. In the car, Nathan reached for my hand, but respected my need for silence as the full weight of my family's betrayal settled over me. The drive home from my parents' house passed in a blur. Nathan kept glancing at me with concern, but knew me well enough not to push me to talk until I was ready. When we finally reached our apartment, the dam broke. I collapsed onto our couch and sobbed deep, gut-wrenching sobs that came from a lifetime of never being enough. Nathan sat beside me, holding me while I cried. "I can't believe they asked you to cancel our wedding," he said when my tears finally subsided. "That's beyond unreasonable." "The worst part is," I said, my voice hoarse, "a part of me expected something like this. Not this extreme, but something. Some way they would make my wedding about Amber." "What do you want to do?" Nathan asked, his voice gentle but serious. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you want to postpone to keep peace in your family, we can do that. If you want to go forward as planned, I'll support that too. This is our decision, yours and mine." His words, "our decision," highlighted everything that was healthy about our relationship in contrast to the dysfunction I'd just witnessed. Nathan saw us as a team. My family saw me as an accessory to Amber's life. "I need some time to think," I told him. "But I know I don't want to cancel our wedding." That night, I'd barely slept. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my mother, each one more manipulative than the last. "I'm disappointed you left without resolving things. Amber cried for hours after you left. I've raised you to be more compassionate than this. I've already called the church to see about December dates." I turned my phone off around midnight, unable to bear any more guilt-tripping. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day in a fog, trying to make sense of my feelings. Nathan worked from home to be near me, bringing me tea and giving me space when I needed it. Around noon, my best friend Jessica called, having received a strange message from my mother asking for her help in convincing Stephanie to do the right thing. After I explained the situation, Jessica's outrage validated my own feelings. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," she fumed. "You've supported Amber through every drama in her life. You even drove 6 hours to pick her up when she and Ryan had that fight in Tahoe last year. She can't handle attending your wedding because of a breakup? Please." Jessica reminded me of all the times I'd set aside my own needs for my family's demands and how little reciprocal support I'd received. "You've spent your whole life dimming your light for Amber," she said. "Don't let them extinguish it now." After we hung up, I went to our spare room closet and pulled out a box I'd kept since childhood journals and mementos I'd saved over the years. Flipping through my teenage diaries, I found entry after entry documenting similar patterns: Amber's needs superseding mine, my accomplishments minimized, my struggles dismissed. One entry from my 16th birthday particularly stood out. I'd written about how my parents had forgotten to pick me up from my after-school job because they were shopping for Amber's middle school dance dress. I'd waited for 2 hours before finally walking the 3 miles home in the rain, only to find them all too busy with Amber's fitting to notice I was missing. When I'd expressed hurt, my mother accused me of being dramatic and jealous. Reading these forgotten incidents awakened something in Minute, just sadness or anger, but clarity. This wasn't a one-time overreaction on my mother's part. This was a lifelong pattern of being treated as less worthy than my sister. The next day, I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist, Dr. Reynolds, whom I'd been seeing intermittently since college. After relating the events of the family dinner, I asked the question weighing on me, am I being selfish for not wanting to postpone my wedding? Dr. Reynolds leaned forward, her expression serious. Stephanie, I want you to consider something. If your friend Jessica told you her mother demanded she cancel her wedding because her sister had a breakup, what advice would you give her? The answer came immediately. I'd tell her that's an unreasonable request and she shouldn't do it. And why is that? Because a breakup, while painful, is a normal life event that adults need to cope with. Expecting someone to cancel their wedding is an extreme overreaction. Dr. Reynolds nodded. You've just answered your own question. The issue isn't whether you're being selfish, it's why you're even questioning whether this unreasonable demand might be justified. We spent the rest of the session discussing the long-term patterns in my family and how they'd shaped my self-perception. Dr. Reynolds helped me see that my hesitation wasn't about the current situation, but about a lifetime of conditioning to prioritize my sister's feelings above my own needs. Your wedding day is about celebrating your commitment to Nathan, she reminded me. It's not about managing your sister's emotional response to her own breakup. Those are separate issues that your family is inappropriately conflating. By the end of our session, I felt something shifting inside me, a new resolve forming where uncertainty had been. I wasn't responsible for Amber's happiness. I deserved to celebrate my marriage without guilt or reservation. That evening, after hours of discussion, my path became clear. I wouldn't cancel or postpone our wedding. I wouldn't dim my joy to accommodate Amber's pain. And most significantly, I wouldn't allow my mother's manipulation to dictate one of the most important days of my life. I think I told Nathan, my voice steadier than it had been in days, that we need to uninvite my parents and Amber from our wedding. The words hung in the air between us, simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Nathan took my hands in his. Are you sure that's what you want? It's a big step. I'm sure, I said, surprising myself with my conviction. If they can't support our marriage without conditions, then they don't deserve to be there when we make our vows. Nathan pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm with you, he whispered. All the way. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since the family dinner, my decision made. The hard part would be following through, but I knew with absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing not just for our wedding, but for my own self-worth and our future together. The morning after my decision, I sat at our kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop, trying to find the right words. How do you uninvite your own family from your wedding? There's no template for that in wedding planning guides. Nathan had offered to be part of this conversation, but I knew this was something I needed to do myself. After several drafts, I crafted an email that was firm but not cruel. Dear Mom, Dad, and Amber. After careful consideration, Nathan and I have decided to proceed with our wedding as planned on June 15th. We cannot and will not cancel or postpone our celebration to accommodate Amber's recent breakup. More importantly, the demand to do so has made it clear that you are unable to support our marriage with the unconditional love it deserves. Therefore, we have made the painful decision to withdraw our invitation to the wedding. This isn't a decision we've made lightly, nor is it open to negotiation. I hope that someday we can rebuild our relationship on healthier terms, but for now, this boundary is necessary for my well-being and the start of my marriage. I wish you all the best. Stephanie. I read it over 3 times, my finger hovering over the send button. Part of me wanted to soften it, to leave room for reconciliation before the wedding. But another part, the part that had been silenced too many times, knew that any ambiguity would be exploited. I hit send, then immediately turned off my phone and went for a long walk with Cooper, our dog, giving myself space to process the enormity of what I'd done. When I returned home, Nathan was waiting with a supportive smile and open arms. "How are you feeling?" he asked as I collapsed onto the couch beside him. "Like I've just jumped out of an airplane," I admitted. Terrified, but also free. The backlash began within the hour. I turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. My mother had moved from shock, "Is this some kind of joke?" to anger, "After everything we've done for you," to manipulation, "Your father is devastated. His blood pressure is through the roof in record time." My father called once, leaving a terse voicemail asking me to be reasonable and call your mother before this gets out of hand. Amber sent a series of texts accusing me of being jealous of her my entire life and using her breakup as an excuse to exclude her from my precious day. Then came the flying monkey's extended family members, enlisted to pressure me into changing my mind. My Aunt Linda called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. My cousin Tyler texted saying I'd always been the difficult one and should grow up and stop being so selfish. Even my grandmother, who rarely got involved in family disputes, left a message expressing her disappointment in my disrespect for family values. What shocked me most wasn't the anger, but how quickly the narrative shifted. According to the version being circulated, I had arbitrarily banned my family because I couldn't stand sharing attention with my heartbroken sister. My mother conveniently omitted the part where she demanded I cancel my wedding. Nathan's family, in contrast, was unfailingly supportive. When we explained the situation to his parents over dinner that weekend, Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Family should lift you up, not tear you down," she said simply. "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself." James, typically more reserved with his emotions, added, "You'll always have a place with us, Stephanie. No conditions attached." Their unwavering acceptance made the contrast with my own family even starker. This was what family support should feel like, not a transaction, but a gift freely given. The weeks that followed required practical adjustments to our wedding plans. We revised our seating arrangements, notified our vendors of the guest list change, and adjusted our budget without the nominal contribution my parents had promised. Jessica stepped up as my chosen family representative for certain traditions, and Nathan's cousin volunteered to handle some duties my sister would have performed as maid of honor. Surprisingly, these logistics were far less stressful than I'd anticipated. Without my mother's constant opinions and criticism, wedding planning became enjoyable again. Nathan and I made decisions based on what we wanted, not what would cause the least family drama. Some days were harder than others. Mother's Day came and went with a hollow ache I couldn't quite shake. I second-guessed myself when I picked up my dress from Final Alterations, wondering momentarily if I was overreacting. But then I'd remember my mother's words, "Amber can't handle seeing you happy right now," and my resolve would strengthen. Throughout this period, Dr. Reynolds helped me navigate my conflicting emotions, the grief of family estrangement alongside the relief of setting boundaries. "What you're feeling is normal," she assured me. "You can miss the family you wish you had while still protecting yourself from the family you actually have." As our wedding date approached, the pressure intensified. My mother left tearful voicemails about still having time to fix this mistake. My father sent an email listing all the ways I was hurting the family with my stubbornness. These messages stung, but they no longer shook my conviction. I was learning that setting boundaries isn't a single act, but a continuous practice. Each time I held firm against manipulation, I grew stronger. Each day I prioritized my well-being and my relationship with Nathan. I became more confident in my decision. The most unexpected outcome of this difficult period was how it clarified who truly belonged in my life. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out with messages of support. Colleagues brought me coffee and offered listening ears. Nathan's extended family sent cards welcoming me to their family. 6 weeks after sending that email, I realized I was no longer waiting for my parents to understand or accept my decision. Their approval, which had seemed so vital my entire life, was becoming less essential to my happiness. I was building a life centered on mutual respect and genuine love, and there was no room in that life for conditional acceptance. 3 weeks before our wedding, I received an unexpected phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a familiar voice said, "Stephanie, it's your Aunt Patricia. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My heart sank. Aunt Patricia was my mother's older sister, and though we'd always gotten along well, I braced myself for another attempt to make me see reason. But her next words surprised me. "I want you to know that I think you're doing the right thing," she said without preamble. "And I'd like to come to your wedding if the invitation still stands." I was momentarily speechless. "You're not calling to convince me to apologize to Mom." "Absolutely not," she replied firmly. "Your mother told me her version of events, but I've known Margaret my entire life." I read between the lines. Over the next hour, Aunt Patricia shared insights into my family dynamics that put my entire childhood in perspective. She revealed that my mother had grown up in the shadow of her own golden child sister Patricia herself and had internalized toxic patterns she was now repeating with her daughters. "Your mother was always convinced our parents loved me more," Patricia explained. "In some ways, she spent her life trying to prove she could be the perfect mother by creating the perfect daughter in Amber. You were a reminder of her own feelings of inadequacy, so she subconsciously pushed you aside." This revelation didn't excuse my mother's behavior, but it helped me understand it. The cycle of favoritism hadn't begun with might was an inherited trauma my mother was perpetuating. "I should have spoken up years ago," Aunt Patricia said, regret evident in her voice. "I saw what was happening, but I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere." "I'm sorry for that, Stephanie." Her apology brought tears to my eyes. After weeks of being villainized by my family, having someone acknowledge the truth was profoundly validating. Aunt Patricia also revealed that my uninvitation had caused significant ripples in the extended family. My mother had been calling relatives to garner sympathy, but her campaign was backfiring. Many family members found her demand that I cancel my wedding excessive, even for her. Some were questioning other incidents they'd witnessed over the years, seeing them in a new light. This conversation marked a turning point. With Aunt Patricia's support, I felt emboldened to take control of the narrative that had been constructed around me. I'd spent my life being cast as the difficult daughter, the less-than sister, the selfish one, but that wasn't my truth. That evening, after discussing it with Nathan, I made a strategic decision. I wouldn't engage in public mudslinging or attempt to expose my family's behavior to the world. Instead, I would simply tell my truth to those who asked, without embellishment or bitterness. I started with a private message to family members who had reached out with criticism, explaining calmly and factually what had transpired. I didn't ask them to take sides or attend the wedding. I just offered my perspective, then gave them space to form their own conclusions. Next, I created a private post on our wedding website, visible only to our invited guests. Some of you may have heard that my immediate family will not be attending our celebration. While we had hoped everyone could share in our joy, we've made the difficult decision to surround ourselves exclusively with those who support our marriage unconditionally. We appreciate your understanding and look forward to celebrating with you. This simple, dignified statement prompted an outpouring of support from friends and relatives who had experienced similar family dynamics. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years called to share their own stories of navigating my mother's behavior. Friends offered to step in for traditional family roles at the wedding. Meanwhile, my mother was still attempting to control the situation through increasingly desperate measures. She scheduled a family reunion for the same weekend as our wedding, then acted hurt when relatives declined to attend her last-minute event. She started showing up at places she knew I frequented, hoping for a chance encounter where she could confront me in person. I avoided these attempts. Most telling was her social media campaign passive-aggressive posts about ungrateful children and the importance of family loyalty that made even her staunchest supporters uncomfortable. The more she pushed, the more people began to see the dynamics at play. The turning point came when my mother hosted her annual pre-summer dinner party, an event she used to showcase her perfect family and immaculate hosting skills. For the first time in its 15-year history, attendance was noticeably sparse. Several key friends and family members declined, some citing schedule conflicts, others more directly stating they were uncomfortable with the situation. Aunt Patricia, who did attend, later told me my mother had spent the evening obsessively discussing my betrayal, alienating even those who had come to support her. "She's painted herself into a corner," Patricia observed. "The more she tries to punish you publicly, the more she reveals about herself." 2 weeks before the wedding, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike my mother's emotional salvos, his message was brief and direct. "Stephanie, I may not agree with how you've handled this situation, but I recognize that your mother's request was unreasonable. I should have spoken up at the dinner. My silence hurt you, and for that, I apologize. I respect your decision about the wedding. If you ever want to talk, my door is open. Dad." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the deeper issues, but it was the first crack in the united front my parents had presented. I sent a simple reply thanking him for his message and saying I'd reach out when I was ready. As the wedding week arrived, the emotional landscape had shifted dramatically. Instead of feeling ostracized and alone, I felt surrounded by genuine support. Friends and family who truly cared about my happiness stepped forward in beautiful ways. Nathan's mother organized a special brunch to replace the traditional mother-daughter pre-wedding activities. Jessica and my bridesmaids filled our apartment with flowers and champagne for an impromptu celebration. Aunt Patricia arrived 3 days early to help with last-minute details, bringing with her my grandmother's pearl earrings, a family heirloom I had admired since childhood but never expected to receive. "She wanted you to have these," Patricia said, "regardless of what your mother may have told you." The tables had turned, not through vengeance or public shaming, but through quiet dignity and truth. By refusing to participate in toxic patterns, I had inadvertently exposed them. By standing firm in my worth, I had created space for authentic relationships to flourish. Coming from Amber, this was practically an olive branch. I replied with a simple thank you and felt a small weight lift. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, and for now, that was enough. Our wedding day dawned with perfect June weather, sunny and clear, with a gentle breeze that rustled the pine trees surrounding Pinecrest Lake Lodge. I woke up in a suite with my bridesmaids, momentarily disoriented before remembering, today I would become Nathan's wife. For a fleeting moment, I felt the absence of my mother and sister, not because I wished they were there under the circumstances that had unfolded, but because I mourned the relationship we should have had. I allowed myself that brief sadness before Jessica appeared with coffee and a contagious excitement that banished melancholy thoughts. "Today is about you and Nathan," she reminded me, squeezing my hand. "Just focus on that." And surprisingly, I found I could. The months of emotional work therapy sessions, boundary setting, processing grief had prepared me for this day in ways I hadn't anticipated. The morning passed in a blur of hairstyling, makeup application, and champagne toasts. When I finally slipped into my wedding dress, the one my mother had deemed too plain, I felt nothing but joy looking at my reflection. Aunt Patricia helped secure my grandmother's pearl earrings, then stepped back with tears in her eyes. "You look absolutely radiant," she said. "Truly beautiful from the inside out." The ceremony itself exceeded every expectation. Walking down the aisle alone was a conscious choice, not a concession to my father's absence, but a statement about entering this marriage as a whole person, complete in myself. When I saw Nathan waiting at the altar, his expression of pure adoration erased any lingering doubts or regrets. Our vows, which we'd written ourselves, spoke of partnership, respect, and choosing each other every day. "I promise to be your safe harbor," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "The place where you are always enough, exactly as you are." My voice shook slightly as I responded. "I promise to build our relationship on honesty and mutual support, to never take your love for granted, and to grow alongside you through whatever life brings." As we exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, the applause from our guests felt like a collective affirmation of the choices we'd made, not just to marry, but to begin our life together, surrounded only by genuine love and support. The reception that followed was filled with moments that would have been impossible with my family present: spontaneous toasts celebrating our authentic selves, uninhibited dancing without fear of criticism, genuine conversations without walking on eggshells. Nathan's father gave a moving speech about welcoming me into their family without reservations or conditions. Jessica shared stories of our friendship that had me laughing through tears. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came during the dinner, when our wedding coordinator discreetly handed me an envelope that had been delivered to the venue. Inside was a card from my father containing only a short note: "I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Wishing you both every happiness. Love, Dad." No dramatic last-minute appearance, no grand reconciliation, just a small acknowledgement that meant more than he probably realized. The evening continued with first dances, cake cutting, and all the traditional celebrations, but with a lightness and joy that felt revolutionary after years of emotional constraint. Near midnight, Nathan and I slipped away to the lodge's dock, taking a quiet moment alone beneath the stars. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Carter?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we looked out over the moonlit lake. "Whole," I answered truthfully. "Complete. Like I've finally stepped fully into myself." He kissed the top of my head. "That's all I've ever wanted for you." The months that followed our wedding brought new challenges and adjustments, as the initial excitement gave way to the reality of building a life together. Our first holiday season as a married couple required creating new traditions to replace family gatherings I'd attended out of obligation rather than desire. We hosted a Friendsgiving that became an instant tradition, with chosen family filling our home with genuine warmth and acceptance. Contact with my immediate family remained limited and carefully managed. My father occasionally sent text messages or emails, which I answered when I felt emotionally prepared. My mother's attempts at communication fluctuated between guilt-inducing laments and angry accusations, depending on her mood. I responded to neither, maintaining the boundary I'd established. Amber surprised everyone by reaching out around Christmas with a tentative message suggesting coffee. Our meeting was awkward, but civil, the first adult interaction we'd had without our mother's influence shaping the dynamic. Nothing was resolved, but a door was opened for potential future healing. 6 months after our wedding, the most unexpected shift occurred. My mother left a voicemail that, for the first time, contained a grudging acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "I've been thinking about what happened before your wedding. I still think you overreacted, but I shouldn't have asked you to cancel it. Call me if you want to talk." It wasn't the full apology or recognition of deeper patterns that would be necessary for true reconciliation, but it was a start, a small crack in the wall of denial she'd built. I didn't call immediately, taking time to process with Dr. Reynolds what healthy next steps might look like. Healing family relationships doesn't, and that became my guiding principle: choice. For the first time in my life, I was choosing how and when to engage with my family, rather than responding to their demands and expectations. I was setting the terms of potential reconnection based on my needs and boundaries, not their comfort. The journey hasn't been linear. There have been attempts by my mother to revert to old dynamics, moments of doubt when I questioned my decisions, days when the absence of what should have been hurts acutely. But with each passing month, the foundation of my new life with Nathan grows stronger, built on mutual respect and genuine acceptance. Perhaps the most profound lesson I've learned through this experience is that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. Family consists of the people who make space for you to be authentically yourself, who celebrate your joys without resentment, who support you through challenges without keeping score. I've also learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. By refusing to dim my light to make others comfortable, I've actually inspired friends and even distant relatives to examine their own family dynamics and set healthier boundaries. Several people have told me that watching me navigate this situation gave them courage to address toxic patterns in their own relationships. The wedding day that my mother demanded I cancel became not just a celebration of my marriage to Nathan, but a declaration of my worth and my right to happiness. By turning the tables, choosing my well-being over appeasing others, I changed more than just my wedding plans. I changed the trajectory of my life. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, your happiness matters too.